So, I want you to picture a single banknote, but not just any old bill. I'm talking about one with 14, count 'em, 14 zeros printed right on it. It's just an absolutely staggering amount of money. 100 trillion. I mean, just look at that. It almost looks fake, doesn't it? Like a number from a board game or cartoon. It's kind of hard to even wrap your head around a number that big. So, the obvious question is, what could you actually buy with this thing? You thinking private island? A garage full of supercars? Maybe you could buy a small country. What's the real-world value of a $100 trillion bill? Well, the answer is kind of shocking. In Zimbabwe back in 2008, this much money, it wouldn't even get you a ticket for the public bus. And no, that's not a punchline. It's the very real, very tragic story of one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in modern history. Okay, so to really get how a currency can just completely fall apart like this, we've got to rewind the clock. Because before all the chaos, Zimbabwe was a country with huge potential, a world away from the economic nightmare it was about to become. What you're seeing here is a tale of two Zimbabwes. On the one hand, you have the past, a nation literally called the Breadbasket of Africa, loaded with natural resources, exporting tons of food. And on the other side, the trigger, a single government policy called the fast-track land reform, which led to the seizure of productive farms. This one move started a catastrophic chain reaction. And you can see how the dominoes fell. First, that land reform policy completely guts the country's farming industry. With nothing to sell abroad, the foreign money just stops coming in. Suddenly, the government's income goes through the floor. So, with soldiers and government workers to pay, they did the only thing they thought they could do: fire up the money printer. And that single decision, well, it kicked off what you can only call a race of zeros. A frantic, desperate sprint where the government was printing money faster and faster, basically trying to outrun total economic collapse. And this timeline just shows you how insane the speed of this was. By 2005, inflation is already in the triple digits, which is terrible. A year later, they tried this quick fix, just chopping zeros off the money. But it did nothing. By 2008, the whole situation had gone nuclear. And just a year after that, the currency was totally abandoned. Just let that number sink in for a second. 79.6 billion%. That wasn't the inflation rate for the year. That was for one single month, November 2008. We're not talking about prices doubling every month or even every week. At the very peak, prices in Zimbabwe were doubling every few hours. And to even try to keep up, the central bank was just pumping out these ridiculous banknotes. $10 billion, $50 billion, $100 billion. And then, yep, the famous $100 trillion bill. Every single one of them was basically worthless the second it came off the printer. So you might be asking, why didn't just lopping off the zeros work? Well, this quote right here explains it perfectly. The government was trying to treat a symptom, the number of zeros, while totally ignoring the disease. That giant hole in the bottom of the glass, that was the printing press, and it was still running 24/7. You know, it's easy to get lost in these giant, abstract numbers. But the real story here is what this all meant for actual, everyday people. When their savings, their salaries, their entire financial world just evaporated into thin air. Seriously, try to imagine this. You get paid for a month's work, and you need a wheelbarrow to carry it home. Tellers at the bank didn't even count the cash anymore. They just waited. Everything you'd saved for your entire life, for retirement, for your kids, gone. Worth less than a loaf of bread, literally overnight. The second you got paid, you had to sprint to the store and buy anything, soap, cooking oil, anything real, before your cash lost even more value in the next hour. So fundamentally, money is supposed to do three simple things for us: store value for the future, be a stable way to price things, and be an easy way to buy and sell stuff. The Zimbabwe dollar couldn't do any of them. It couldn't hold value for an hour, prices were meaningless, and you needed a wheelbarrow to use it. In economic terms, it had stopped being money. It was officially dead. And here's what happens when a society's money dies. Society itself starts to break down. Public services fell apart because nobody's salary meant anything. The country's brightest minds, doctors, engineers, teachers, they just left. And in that chaos, black markets and shady deals became the only way for people to actually get by. By 2009, things were so bad, they just couldn't continue. The government had absolutely no moves left. They were backed into a corner, and they had to do something drastic. They surrendered. I mean, that's really the only word for it. In what had to be a moment of national humiliation, they officially gave up on their own currency. The race of zeros was over, and they had lost.
So what was the solution? It's a strategy called dollarization. Basically, Zimbabwe just started using other countries' stable money, the US dollar, the South African rand, whatever worked. And the effect was instant. By handing over control of the money supply, the government stopped hyperinflation dead in its tracks. Just like that.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway from this wild story? Well, the most important thing to remember is that this was not a natural disaster. It wasn't a flood or an earthquake. This was a completely man-made catastrophe. And it has a very, very clear lesson for all of us. And this is it. This is the ironclad law of economics that Zimbabwe's story proves so tragically. When a government tries to print its way out of its problems without actually creating any real value in the economy, this is the path you go down. It's inevitable. Which brings us right back to where we started. That $100 trillion banknote? Well, today you can buy one on the internet for a few bucks. It's a collector's item now, a tourist souvenir. It's become a little paper monument to a completely shattered economy. And it really leaves you with a big final question. This whole story is about more than just economics and bad policy. It's about trust. At its heart, that's all money really is, a system of collective trust. So what really happens to a country and to its people when that trust is completely and utterly broken? It's definitely a powerful thought to end on. If you found this explainer interesting, do us a huge favor and don't forget to like and follow, because we have plenty more deep dives like this one coming your way.